Raj Kiran ji. Before they start the session, can I ask Encho Ullaru?
Edda sir. Edda. So great, sir.
Great, great.
So lucky you could. Thank you, sir. You could adjust your time because I had a SLBC of Andhra Pradesh in the morning. So I was engaged there. So I requested if I can hear, sir. Uh, Thank you for adjusting the time, sir.
No, luckily I had no other engagement just now, so it was possible.
Thank you,
So
sir.
I'm happy to, you have a major task in this amalgamation and cultural integration, and I have been through this twice before, though not in the bank. So I'm happy
Yeah.
to share.
Thank you, sir. So first of all, uh, just to introduce myself to Gopal sir, I'm Dr. Chetna Pandey, host for this event, and I have been reaching out to you, sir. And we all are in a state of ecstasy to welcome the eminent personality, a great karma yogi, an author, corporate advisor, and an inspirational speaker who has been instrumental in building up many institutions and has been still contributing to all by sharing his intellectual wealth. Having 53 years of management experience, 32 years of board experience, over 100 keynotes in India and abroad, he has authored 16 books and is continuously writing newspaper articles, a great management writer, thinker, and as we know, one of his book, The Case of the Bonsai Manager, is the perfect antidote for every manager who feels they are not achieving their full potential. He is none other than Sri R. Gopal Krishnan. Gopal sir, as he likes to be addressed, has studied physics in Kolkata University, engineering at IIT Kharagpur, and attended the advanced management program at Harvard Business School. He has been a professional manager from 1967. He has served as chairman of Unilever Arabia, as MD of Brook Bond Lipton, and vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, as director of Tata Sons and several Tata companies. He serves as an independent director and non-executive chairman of Castrol India, and also as an independent director of Hemas Holdings Sri Lanka. He is actively engaged in both instructional and inspirational speaking. He has authored altogether 16 books, and still some are on the offing of release. On behalf of the entire Union Bank family, we welcome Gopal sir to this session. To brief you, sir, we have altogether 300 attendees to this call, and which includes all the topmost leaders of our bank. Among all the executives in this call, we have with us our respected Managing Director and CEO, Sri Raj Kiran Raiji sir, Executive Directors, Sri Gopal Singh Gosai sir, Sri Dinesh Kumar Garg sir, Sri Birupaksh Mishra sir, Sri Manas Ranjan Biswal sir, Chief General Managers, Deputy General Managers, Assistant General Managers, and Regional Heads, and many other unionites. I would now request our MD sir to welcome our Gopal sir with his few words. Over to you, sir.
Very good afternoon, respected Gopal Krishna sir, my executive directors, all my leadership team, which is connected. We are really blessed today that we can hear sir today. Sir, silently, I was following you for last maybe uh, 10 years. I think maybe when that Bonsai Manager book came up. And I should admit, my GM's interview, Dr. Pritam Singh was there. He asked me which is the recent book you read. I said Bonsai Manager. And he went great depth drilling me on what is your learning, why it is important, and all that. So I really cherish those discussions. And in my leadership journey, I have drawn heavily from your books, your thoughts. particularly your thoughts on analyzing how a leader emerges. So how the potential of a person can come out. And when they said Unilever Arabia, I can recall, I think there is some story you have written somewhere, because a lot of your book has a lot of small experiences and stories that when you went there, what happened with you and all that. Of late, I'm not reading much, but then I still recall some of those pieces of wisdom and experiences you have shared in those books. So I think it is great actually. And the people who are listening to you today, or who will read your books after this, will understand most of my speeches, most of my leadership summits, when I speak to my team, I am drawing heavily from you. They will immediately say, oh, our MD always speaks about it. Because actually I have drawn heavily from your thoughts, your books. So I am a very silent follower of you. So actually last time, sir, we tried you for our Triveni Sangam, actually when all the three banks, but then you were busy actually, because I wanted you to specifically come. And there's a purpose, sir, actually. When I read you, I can understand the kind of changes as an organization like we need when we do a amalgamation like this. Three great banks coming together and three sets of leaders. Even though for outside world we are public sector bank, we are entirely different. Actually, our cultures are different, our leadership traits are different. And when we converge to have one single culture, one single thought, to have one single leader to follow, it is not that easy. So I think we always thought that your guidance will definitely help us. That is the idea of inviting you, sir. And I'm very sure my people will be greatly benefited by your talk. And anyway, I keep talking to my people. Now I will not stand in the way, but then I just wanted to thank you for all the support which unknowingly you have done to my life to emerge as a leader in the banking industry. I have heavily drawn from you. And maybe it is a message to the other young leaders who are listening to you today, and go back and read your books so that they can also change their leadership styles whenever required, correct something, and go to the full potential. That is the ultimate aim. All are good leaders, I know, but then yes, there are some corrections we have to make. We need to understand our leadership styles. Some corrections in our personalities we may have to do. And with that, I think we'll all emerge as good leaders. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Rajkiran Rai ji, thank you very much for your very kind words. I am greatly honored that you have said such fine words about me, and also that Chetana ji has chased me relentlessly to open an account with Union Bank. The account being this opportunity to speak. And success has many fathers. So now I can tell other people that I had some role to play in your rise to be MD and CEO, not just of one bank, but of three merged banks. Anyway, thanks a lot. I won't spend my time just on formalities. I come to you this afternoon because I have had the deepest experiences in merger and cultural integration, not as a consultant, but as a person who's actually done the plastic surgery. My first experience was with Unilever Arabia back in 1991. On the day the Kuwait war started and American troops moved into Kuwait, I arrived to merge 11 companies which were based in 5 countries with different partners. Now, to our eye, untrained eye, all Arabs look the same because they're wearing a similar dish dash and kafia. But I can tell you, the Bahraini is very as possessive about his identity compared to the Saudi or the Emirati as a Punjabi is compared to a Bengali or whatever. It was a very interesting experience for me because for the first time in my career, and I would say not since then have I had the experience again. I had 16 nationalities working in my company. 16 nationalities. In my board, I had one Frenchman, one Dutch, two Englishmen, and two Indians. So it was quite a heavy mix. And both those two Indians were also NRIs, they're UK based people who'd been away for a long time. As soon as I finished that, experience, I was transferred back to my home country, and I was appointed as the CEO and the managing director of Brook Bond in 1995. And at that time, 8 companies had been merged. When I use the word merge, they had been legally merged. The merger process had happened. Brook Bond India Limited, a tea company, which is twice the size of its rival, Lipton India Limited, which is also a tea company. And they had acquired an ice cream company called Quality, a tomato ketchup company called Kisan, a dairy company called Milk Foods, and 2 tea estates called Dumduma Tea Estates and Tea Estates India Limited. So I had this avial, those of you who are from the south will know that avial is a sort of a mixed vegetable curry in a um, buttermilk dahi sort of base, and I had learnt a lot out of that. So many of the comments that I will make come out of one international amalgamation and one domestic amalgamation experience that I had, albeit 15, 20 years ago. When I think back philosophically, at my age, I'm allowed to do that. I think the greatest merger and cultural integration endeavor in the history of mankind and in the public domain is the formation of India in 1947. Now, many of us were either not born or we were not old enough to observe it. But I have been fascinated, even though I was a small child only when all this was happening, and of course I had no first-hand knowledge, that we took a large country with so many religions and languages as we have, and we set ourselves a task of integrating these various things through 2 methods. I'm using management jargon, not political jargon, because that's our subject in management. One was building excellence, and the second was institution building. This is what India did. If you don't want to just be critical of everything, and it's not a perfect job, by the way. No, it's like a marriage, no marriage is perfect. Everybody thinks the other guy is very happy because he's got a pretty wife. But each fellow knows in his own marriage, there are some tensions and complications. So mergers and amalgamations are like a marriage. There are a lot of give and take, and each one has to think that he has given more than he has taken. Otherwise, you don't have a marriage. In a marriage, the art of good marriage is to give more, but never give more. And let the other person feel that they've done the same thing. And the same principle has applied to the way our national leaders, they did institution building by giving us a constitution, a parliament, a set of rules, and a way to go about it. It might have outlived its utility. I'm not commenting on that, and that's not our subject today. And they went after excellence because at that time they judged that the Soviet model was the world's best. They benchmarked and brought the best practices. Everything has a shelf life, and maybe some of those practices have worn out of their shelf life. One of the important points I want to bring out at a very overall level is the deep conflict that an individual feels. Now, you are going to be 80,000 employees, Mr. MD, in your company, some from Andhra Bank, some from Corporation Bank, and some from I will call it the old Union Bank because I will refer to your new company as the new Union Bank. I hope that's the correct thing to do.
Yes.
So there are 80,000 new Union Bank people broken up, I would guess, as 40,000 plus 20,000 plus 20,000. It doesn't matter if I'm a bit wrong here and there. And India is, at the time of partition, 350 million people. And now take a person like me. I am a Tamil and I'm very proud of it. I am a Hindu. I'm very proud of it. I am urban. I'm very proud of it. But all these are subject to being an Indian, of which also I'm very proud. And by the time I have finished my identity as an Indian, I am reminded, Vasudeva Kutumbam, that we are all part of one large universe of humanity. And my allegiance, therefore, is first as a humanist, second only as an Indian. If I'm inhuman, it doesn't matter whether I'm Indian or Australian or Japanese. So humanist, this is for me. I'm not saying it's true for all of you. I'm a humanist. I'm very proud to be an Indian. And within that, I'm proud to be a Tamil and this and that and so on and so forth. So I would urge you, the most common thing that will come back to your mind and your employees, because I'm addressing the senior people. I'm, a, I'm talking to 300 people, but there are 77,000 or whatever number of other people. People will keep saying, I am Corporation Bank, I am Andhra Bank. In those days, it was like this. And I've been through this, I am Brook Bond, I am Lipton, I am Kisan. The MD likes Lipton people, he doesn't like, all this stuff will go on. And it is very important to have like an onion peel. There are layers and layers of identity. Be proud of every layer. But the overarching identity, I am a new Union Bank employee. If you're proud of having been a corporation bank or Andhra Bank, thank you very much. Be proud of it. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. Like even though I joined Tata at the age of 52, I'm very proud that I was in Hindustan Lever for 31 years. And nobody in Tata will mind if I'm proud I'm in Hindustan Lever. But of course, if I say Hindustan Lever is better than Tata or the other way around, I will create an enemy in one place or another. So I think we are all human beings greatly, greatly given to using the mistaken identity at the wrong time. You are sitting in an interview, you suddenly say, I'm a Tamil, so I'll take Swaminathan and not Rajkiran Rai because one is a Tamil and one is not. That's wrong. I'm an Indian. If you are sitting in a global company like I have, I don't care if he's French or German or Indian. I used to tell the late Mr. Fakir Chand Kohli, who was, as you know, he died recently and he was the first CEO of TCS. I said, sir, I want to ask you, everybody says TCS was full of Tamil people. And he says, luckily I am a Punjabi. So nobody can say that I have recruited Tamil people. But frankly, I am looking for numerate people who got analytical thinking. And I don't give a damn whether they are from Karnataka or Andhra or Punjab or Kashmir. I just take the guy. So I think it's very, very important to say that you're going to be professional about it and your union bankers. And frankly, it's only your fond memories like your childhood. You like the village you grew up in or the city college in which you studied, but it's totally irrelevant for your career. So it's totally irrelevant whether you're from Andhra Bank or Corporation Bank. I don't think the world is interested. If you have some nice pictures of the old days playing badminton with your CEO, keep it. Nobody's interested. It will not advance your career. Neither will it depress your career, hopefully. That will be the way that you all will run your bank. I want to tell you a little story to illustrate how inadvertently, whatever I've said so far is not going to be challenged. There's no question to ask. Nobody will disagree with me. But I want to tell you a story about how inadvertently we become enmeshed in the cobweb of our own past memories and experiences. And every story I tell you is a true story, by the way. So this one is also a true story. Uh, there's a Japanese person called Hiro Onada. And if you want, you can, if you're curious, I will tell the story in a very short way. If you Google Hiro Onoda, you will get the full story. It's a very fascinating story. Hiro Onoda died at the age of 92 or thereabouts, around the turn of the century. Okay, so he must have been born around 1920 or something like that. And Hiro Onoda, when he died, a big coverage of his life was given in the international newspapers. So, what is the story in a nutshell? At the age of 20, he needed a job. And in 1940, the Second World War was going on, and he took employment in His Majesty's service. And he was trained, because he was a very fine young man, in a special, um, you know, special force of people who would use high skills. And he was given that training, and then he was given a backpack, and airdropped into the jungles of Lubang in the Philippines. And his job was to take his 707 rifle every day and look for the American enemy. He would have to oil and clean his rifle, keep it ready, and he would eat the berries and whatever was available in the jungle because he was all by himself. Hiro Onoda did his work very diligently, very efficiently, every day with a lot of hardship. But in 1945, he never inquired whether the war was over. So he kept on doing it till 1971. And they found he's a missing. So the Japanese Air Force sent out various missions. And finally, after 20 years, 26 years, they found him in the jungle of Lubang. By this time, he was a middle-aged person, but he was doing his job properly. He was taking out his rifle, oiling and cleaning it, eating the berries, and he had grown old. And when they found him and they said, "Hey, the war is over, come home," he said, "But why didn't somebody tell me?" They said, "Well, the whole world knows the war is over, and we have been trying to send you radio messages." Anyway, they took him back in 1971 to Tokyo, gave him a hero's welcome, gave him Paramveer Chakra equivalent, and then he retired in a little island, and then he died in 1998 or thereabouts. Now, why I'm telling you the story is most of us, especially professionals like you and me, do this. At the age of 25, you joined the bank, whichever bank it may be. You were told to take out your rifle, oil and clean it, eat berries, and keep looking alert. You kept on doing it. But the world has moved on, and now you're 50, and you're still doing the same thing. And one fine day, somebody comes along and says, "Hey, guy, it's over." And you feel shattered, completely shattered, because in spite of being diligent and doing your work very well, you find you're without a job or without a promotion or whatever is the consequence. There's a bit of Hiro Onoda in all of us. I've also got Hiro Onoda. You also got Hiro Onoda, and you have to sort of uh, remind yourself every morning, especially for those who are past 45, and that may include a lot of the people on this talk, that it's H today, next month an I is added, the third month an R is added. You're getting obsolete gradually. It's like a date expiry medicine, you see in the pharmacy shop, it's sitting on the shelf. Every day, one more day, it's going. And I found this a very fascinating story because it's a true story, of course, it is amazing. Um, to remind myself that, like your body is getting old, you have to work very hard. I'm telling you, I'm 75 now. I have to work very hard to keep my body supple and agile. It's not easy. When I get up in the morning, I feel much more stiff than I was 50 years ago. But you have to work much harder to just stay where you are. And therefore, use those of your employees. I have no problem because the story is in the public domain. If you can share the story with your employees, because it gives you a electric shock in your brain. You say, bloody hell, am I getting obsolete? And the answer is yes, I'm getting obsolete. Now tell me what you're going to do to avoid getting obsolete. So there's no debate that you're getting obsolete. Every one of you who's listening to me today are no different from what I was 30 years ago. And so you are getting obsolete. I've got a lot of other stories, but I won't go into all the stories because I want to leave enough time for a little interaction. And I must finish by about 3:15, Rajkiranji. And then you can have 10-15 minutes for questions.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Um, but I want I was born and raised in Calcutta. And when I was born, Lord Wavell was ruling India, right? He was the British Governor General. Gandhiji and Jinnah were walking in the streets of Bombay and Delhi. So I'm that vintage, quite old. Okay. And um, into that world, uh, I was, of course, very young and didn't know what is happening. Uh, I was exposed in Calcutta because that's where I was born to the Calcutta mercantile world. I mean, when I was 15, 20, and I was now conscious, and those of you who are Bengal or Bengalis or Calcuttans will recognize what I'm saying. to go to Dalhousie Square, to go to Esplanade, to go to Fairley Place was magnificent for a starry-eyed young man who was looking for a job. And in those days, when I graduated in 1964, I was offered a job in a company called McKinnon Mackenzie, and they were offering to pay me 400 rupees a month. I'd have to wear a tie and go to office every day. It's a shipping company, and I'd be given a nice flat in Moira Street. It looked like my life is made. I just have to carry on sticking in the company, and at 60, I will happily retire. The truth is, by the time I was 40, McKinnon Mackenzie ceased to exist. So also was Andrew Yule. So also was Martin Byrne. And a whole host of Calcutta mercantile companies, which were dream jobs in those days, just vanished. It's as though a plague had come and taken them away. Each one has its own story, of course, I will not go into that. So I got very interested right from my younger days about the rise and the fall of companies, because when you're 21, 22, at that time I was not even 20, I was 19, I think. I got very curious. How do you find a career? How do you find a job? Later on, as I grew up, I got interested in how do you keep yourself relevant. And so I have been a great amateur student of history uh, and uh, and anthropology to look at look at dynasties. So I've got a presentation which I often do on the Ottoman Empire, on the Mughal dynasty, on the Roman Empire. Uh, what happened to them? On the British Empire, how did they rise and how did they fall? And I found one thing, what are the lessons I can draw from this? I have not done any original work. I'm not a PhD in history, but I have pulled out what was relevant to me as a manager. And I found that each dynasty rose very fast, but the decay was very slow. Decay was very slow, very slow. So you go not in a parabola, but a distorted parabola, where the tail is long, but the start is very rise. The second thing is that a dynasty comes up because there's a disorder of the previous dynasty. Without getting into politics, the BJP came up because there was a disorder of the Congress, right? I mean, whether you're a congressman or a BJP, there is nothing to debate on this. This is a reality. A long-standing party went into decline, and somebody else came up. It could have been BJP, it could have been anybody else with three alphabets. That is besides the point. But the fact of the matter is that you rose on the ashes, if I may say so, or the smoldering ashes of some other dynasty. Um, then you grew very well because you were outward looking, right? So the Ming dynasty in China had the largest number of big ships. They used to visit Kerala, and I have recently been to Kerala to have a look at their, where those ships landed and how the city of Calicut came up. Um, and it's very interesting to see the Roman Empire was very outward looking. The Mughal dynasty was very outward looking. Then they get used to saying, this is what works here, right? This is what works here. So if you look at the British Empire, they fought little battles here and there. Then they put down the revolution in Tamil Nadu in those days, 1700, with the first Vellore uprising and so on. And then they said the best way to control these fellows is to shoot them, ending up in Jallianwala Bagh. It took over 150 years of such episodes. And by that time, the local Indian population had got sufficiently moved by Gandhiji's leadership, and we all know what happened. So there is a level of outward lookingness coming out of humility, and then the decline happens because of arrogance coming out of I know everything. Humility is followed by arrogance, then humility is followed again by arrogance, except the party is different. So you may have three banks which are 100 years old. Somebody will say, I'm 140 years old, you're only 95 years old, you're a young bank. It doesn't matter two hoots, frankly. You are having rebirth today. Like Hindu philosophy, we say Every object is reborn and reincarnated. This is a completely new bank. And you may have memories of the past, but that's irrelevant, except for your private enjoyment. What are you doing for the future, and will you be there is the question that you have to address in your mind. So, and I'll tell you, decline will be very long and painful. Look at the Mughal Empire. It reached its peak during Akbar's time. And by the time it was finished, it was 1857. It came up in 50, 70 years, 100 years, and then declined over 300 years. And the same is true of the Ottoman Empire. It reached its peak during Mehmed II when he took Constantinople. And that was, if my memory serves, something in the 1400s. But the Ottoman Empire was finally dissolved only in 1918 after the First World War. Now, each person has to decide, do I want to be part of the up or the part of the down? And if you want to be a part of the up, you have to create the up by being outward looking, by being open minded, and by those are formulae that have worked time and again, whether it's a company or an individual, it doesn't matter. I would like to recommend to you, for those of you who are interested, to see a TED talk. It will summarize very nicely whatever I'm saying. It's by a lady called Hala Tomas-Dottir, Tomas. Chetana can take it down and maybe circulate it to the members here. Tomas-Dottir, Hala Tomas-Dottir. And she talks about why crisis of leadership comes in organizations. Since it's a TED talk, it's in the public domain, and maybe Chetana ji, you can even play it. It's only 10 minutes or 15 minutes. You can even play it for all our colleagues here by the time you close. But they tell you that arrogance and hubris is at the root of decline. And so if you keep dwelling on the past, and I used to tell this story in Brook Bond Lipton. Okay, I know Brook Bond was started in 1912. I know Lipton was started in 19 something else, 20. I have lovely stories of how Mr. Brook Bond came or Mr. Thomas Lipton came. I love to tell those stories also because, as you can see by now, I'm rather fond of history. But that's over. Nobody's interested in which school or college you studied in, except to introduce your CV like Chetana ji did just now. It's irrelevant. And so what you can do for the future becomes very important. And that is the central piece. For 10, 15 minutes, I would like to talk about that before I wind up. Because when you bring different things together, there must be a glue. You have to concoct a glue which holds people together. I told you that when, if you look at the history of Indian independence in 1947, the glue was brought together. Apart from the personalities of people, there are many things that go into a national glue. By trying to benchmark what are the world's best economic systems, then you adopted it and you drove excellence and um, you built institutions, parliament, democracy, election, uh, judiciary. You know, we tend, when you see the morning newspaper, to underestimate the accomplishments of this nation because the politicians are fighting with each other, blaming the past and the future and each other. But there is not a single other nation in the world which has maintained democracy, and by definition, democracy is imperfect, which has maintained democracy, judiciary, press freedom, and institutions. Uh, we may be denuding some of them in the opinion of some people or enhancing some of them. But please remember that for 75 years, look at our neighbors. Look what happened in Pakistan. Look what happened in Bangladesh. Look what happened in Turkey. Look what happened in China. Look what's happened in Eastern Europe. Look at the European Union. I mean, we are as diverse as Europe is, but we have managed to hold it together. Imperfectly, I agree. Just like every marriage is imperfect. But it is the ability to manage imperfection that determines cultural integration. And I would like to repeat this. The ability to manage imperfection that determines cultural integration. We psychologists tend to tell you cultural integration is all bhai bandi, love and fresh air and bouquets and roses. When you get married and you're 25 years old, you also think so. By the time you're 30 or 35, you realize that God seems to have brought opposites to get married to each other. You know, the guy who likes to go to the party and leave early gets married to the woman who likes to go to the party and stay late. The guy who likes to get up early in the morning and do exercise gets married to the woman who likes to sleep late, and so on and so forth. And it is that ability to manage imperfections that determines cultural integration. And if you have that mindset, then you get a different outcome. And then you realize that cultural imperfection means give and take, and always giving the impression that you're giving more than you're taking. Just because you're the boss, you're the general manager or chief general manager or deputy general manager, and you have 100 people working under you, you don't have is required. Uh, Certain process means, mechanical means. Maybe you've also done it. I would assume you've done it. So I hope BCG won't mistake me for saying this. Are they also on this call, on this session? Okay. But I'm not taking a pot shot at BCG. But the consultant will come and tell you how to do it. The consultant is like the Catholic priest. He will tell you to be married, love each other deeply, be happy. Here's the holy water. Thank you very much. And then when the priest is gone, you start fighting with each other. So the consultant will tell you right processes, and he's a very valuable chap, and you must pay them well, uh, and take the best experience that they can bring you. But you must always remember that when the consultant has finished his work, you have completed only the technical part. You integrated IT systems, you integrated HR processes, you integrated designations, you waited for somebody to retire and then didn't fill up his job. You know, those kinds of things. That's the technical part. And the consultant, in order to make it look impressive and to make more and more PowerPoint charts for which he will charge you, he will say vision, mission, goals, you know, all that stuff. And you must have also done all that stuff. But if you're Pandu, I could use the word Pandu in the Maharashtra sense of plain Joe, you know, simple guy who's just working down in the organization. The MD can cry himself hoarse with vision mission. It doesn't touch his life. Pandu is not interested. He says, "साहब बड़े बड़े बात करते हैं, देखते हैं क्या होता है." That's the way he goes at it. And he needs something that is close to him, which he can reach out and touch. If his office unit is closing, or uh, it is being shifted to some other location, it matters to him. This vision, mission, and all doesn't matter to him, right? If he has missed a promotion, it matters to him because these are things that affect his immediate life. And I looked around as a management professional, who's now in a reflective mode, and thought of some companies. How did they create a glue? I told you about the Indian nation being formed, but that's a bit too far away also because, as I said, many of you were not even born. I was just about born. But more importantly, we are not close to it. Somebody else may relate with it. A historian might. But think of General Electric, GE, under Jack Welch. Because as management professionals, that is something that will be closer to you. He said, we will take Six Sigma to unite everywhere. It doesn't matter which part of GE you're in. Aerospace division, you may be in finance division, we will follow Six Sigma. You take the example of Toyota. They said Toyota Production System, TPS, started by Taiichi Ono. And Taiichi Ono has become a god for creating the Toyota production system. Many people have been to Toyota, have observed it, come back and tried to implement it, but they have never been able to do it very much like Toyota did. And I want to just mention to you that when I joined Tata's, in a sense, Tata is a mini India. There is Kerala, there is Jammu and Kashmir, there is Bengal. Tata Steel is different from Tata Consultancy. It all looks the same to you, but frankly, they are not the same. It is just like Mr. Rajkiran said in the beginning, they all look like public sector banks. But, Corporation Bank is different from Andhra Bank and uh, State Bank and so on and so forth. So, while the outsider may look at it all as Tata as one, it was not one. There were some common features, but Tata Steel had a different way of doing things compared to Tata Motors or somebody else. So Ratan Tata thought of what he called the TBEM, Tata Business Excellence Model. Now, if you wish at some stage, the people who, I was on the executive committee, so I know it from a helicopter level, but it is based on the Malcolm Baldrige model, and it is what brought Tata together. So every year on JRD Tata's birthday, 29th of July, we meet together to reaffirm the values of Tata's, and that's very important, but to also to give awards for TBEM scores. And whereas only one, no company got the TBEM award in the first. After 3-4 years, one company got it. Even today, probably I'm out of date. I've retired 5 years ago, but probably 8 or 10 companies have got that award, and Tata has many more companies. It's a very high standard. So the first point about excellence I want to leave with you is, as a bank, if your vision mission must be telling you to be the best bank, the best customer service, I can imagine what your vision mission is saying. But are you going to benchmark yourself and set out on the journey? The journey fruition may not happen during your tenure, but that doesn't matter. You are only one runner in the relay race. Somebody else is going to follow you, somebody who was there before you. And I would strongly comment that you all consider amongst the PSUs, that PSBs, sorry, to adopt an excellence model which is suitable for the financial industry. I'm told the Malcolm Baldrige model works even well for them, and undertake this long journey, because as somebody said, every journey begins with the first step. The second point I wanted to touch upon, and I'm being very brief, advisedly with the available time, is to set in place what I call institution building. You are not an institution merely because you are there. You know, um, you are an institution because there's a hoary past. So, what's the difference between a good company? Will the new Union Bank be a good bank, or will it be a business institution, financial institution? You must think deeply in your top team. What is the difference between a great bank, a good bank, and a great institution? A good company is run by a good CEO in a good way. And given the tenure of top leadership, it may be 5 years or 7 years that you get at the top level, either as an ED or an MD, as the case may be. But an institution is crafted by a shaper. And the shift of emphasis requires a leadership mindset change. And the top leadership of new Union Bank can do something about it. I got very, oh, I'll tell you, think of VT station, right? And compare it to Lonavala railway station, which is an institution. I don't think anybody will choose Lonavala railway station to be an institution, even though it may be older. Because there's history, there is grandeur, there's awe in the way VT station is. It's been a part of people's lives for days and years together. Think of Taj Mahal in Agra and compare it to a Kabristan. If you're very matter of fact, Taj Mahal is nothing but a glorified Kabristan where people are buried. In this particular case, very important people. But it's a Kabristan. But you cannot by any means equate Taj Mahal to a Kabristan. I mean, that will be shallow. Taj Mahal is an institution. Kabristan are Kabristan. So do you want to be a Taj Mahal or do you want to be a Kabristan? Do you want to be a VT station or a Lonavala station? Is a choice that you have to make. And that requires you, as the thought, I'm associated with the SP Jain Institute of Management and Research in Mumbai. And therefore I like to share and teach and do that thing. And one day in an academic meeting, it's very rare for an academic and a practitioner to collaborate. There are two parallel shoots. Academics write their own papers, like your banking research institute, nobody reads it, and the practitioners do their own thing, and the academics don't read it. They have healthy disrespect for each other. Management is no different from that. And I raise the question, what can a good CEO do to create an institution out of his bank, out of his organization? And then I could think of many people like Tata and Levers, where I had my experience. And I could think of 150 years of stories. But I said, I can't go and talk to Jamshedji Tata. He's dead and gone 100 years ago. I can't go and talk to William Hesketh Lever. He's dead and gone. So I said, I must choose Gen L companies. Gen L meaning generation liberalization. So they are 30, 40 years old. You can't choose Flipkart or something, who are 10 years old or 15 years old either. It's too early to call them institutions. So I chose Gen L, 35, 40 years old. And I wrote to those CEOs and I said, will you collaborate with us in a piece of research that we are undertaking? 6 of them replied and said they are happy to do so. And 2 of them are financial institutions, which may be of more interest to you than some of the others. One was the HDFC Group, which is Deepak Parekh, who shaped it. And one was Kotak Mahindra Bank, which is Uday Kotak, who shaped it. Then we have Harsh Mariwala of Marico, an FMCG company. And we had a software company called TCS, which Fakir Chand Kohli and Ramadurai shaped it. And we had Biocon, which is India's prominent biotechnology company, which Kiran Mazumdar Shaw has shaped. And one engineering company we chose. So we had a diversity. Anil Naik of Larsen and Toubro. And we have run almost 1,000 hours amongst all of us, myself and my co-authors, to lay out what are the principles of institution building and illustrate those principles through the experiences of these Gen L companies. All of these companies, when I was becoming a director of Hindustan Lever back in 1987, these were not particularly well-known companies. Who had heard of Biocon in the 1980s? Or even Marico wasn't even born. There was no Kotak Bank. Kotak was studying in school or college or whatever. So I've chosen companies which are more recent, where the founders are available for us to go and interview and really understand. And here's what we found. And we have published them as 6 books, by the way, just for your information. Because, management is like Bharatanatyam. It's a performing art. You cannot do an MA in Bharatanatyam by reading all the texts that are available. You have to actually get up in the morning and practice. You cannot learn music without doing riyaz. You cannot play tennis internationally without standing on the court and hitting the ball 6 hours a day. So you cannot be a great manager without understanding there are multiple styles. So you will see somebody like Balamurali Krishna who breaks some of the traditional rules of Carnatic music, but has created a new genre. Or for that matter, in every sort of field, you will find people. So we have written 6 books. 3 of them are already out in the market. One is on TCS, one is on Larsen and Toubro, and one is on Biocon. And the other 3 was held up due to lockdown. I think it's coming in February. HDFC Group, Uday Kotak, and Mariwala. So there are 6 books. And I want to tell you the Brahma Mantra before I shut up and open it to questions. Because we found in my teaming up with the academics that there are a lot of books in American contexts. Lessons from excellent companies, Tom Peters and Waterman and Peters. Then Good to Great, Jim Collins. What great companies do, etc., etc. But they are very, in the cultural context of transformation of companies is very important. So what is it about Indian companies that makes them potentially institutions, if not already institutions? And we found the Brahma Mantra, which I call the 3+5 matrix. So I will just briefly explain it, not in much detail, but if there are questions and if there is time, we can talk about it. We put down 8 things which affects their thinking and therefore their behavior and therefore their actions. 8 items came. And those 8 things are: number 1, people relations. Number 2, short-term and long-term focus. Number 3, critical thinking. I'm just mentioning it. They look obvious, but I'll tell you the number of companies that miss this bus. 4th is orbit shifting. 5th is breaking barriers. 6th is Identifying the levers of change. Identifying the levers of change. You can't sit in front of the cockpit and just handle all the buttons and hope it works. If you sit in a BMW car and maybe a very proud owner of a BMW, tomorrow you sit in a Mercedes car, it doesn't work the same way. Of course, the engine and the transmission work the same way, but the cockpit is different. You must know. Cyclical learning and stakeholder orientation. So there are 8 factors. Then we asked ourselves the question: we found all the 8 factors with these 6 companies, but 3 of them had a higher frequency of occurrence. They would come time and again. And those were the first 3 I mentioned: people relations, short-term and long-term focus, and critical thinking. The other 5, some used, some didn't use. They have different ways of doing it. And we have called this 3 plus 5 matrix. 3 compulsory, 5 optional. 8-point matrix as the Brahma mantra. It doesn't mean that if you follow it blindly, it will work. Because if I tell you the principles of good Carnatic music singing, it doesn't mean if you just follow those rules, you will become Balamurali Krishna. You will not. But you have a chance. And I would very much like to see the new Union Bank. In 40, 50 years' time, I won't be there, you won't be there. That doesn't matter. You have to understand you're into a relay race. But in 40 years' time, I would very much like the public sector banks to be the best banks in this country. Not that state banks' market capitalization should be exceeded by 2 or 3 private banks. And then say, we are banking to the poor, and you start making excuses. The definition of best may change. You may not have market capitalization as your criterion. And it is possible to do it. It is possible. Okay? We always think that if you want to be the best bank, you have to compromise on efficiency. That's not true. People relations is the only one I will talk about for 2 minutes. I was surprised how much time the top leadership spends on people relations, employees, recruitment. I'm not trying to build up your HR department. And this people relations is not the job of the HR department anyway. It's the job of the top leadership. The top 20, 30 people in your bank, if they are not spending between 25 to 40% of their time on people, then they are not doing their job. Recruitment, appraisal, counseling, you name it. If TCS has such a good way of succession planning, Fakir Chand Kohli developed Ramadurai, Ramadurai developed Chandra, a cycle. Anytime they're able to produce more leaders. Hindustan Lever has done it very successfully. Now, we have talked about all of these in our books. And in the interest of time, I'm going to stop now, because those of you who are interested can, of course, read the books. And I hope that my wish is that we don't take process of merger to be an end in itself. It is the beginning. It's like maternity. The baby has just been delivered. It doesn't mean the baby is going to grow up well. And if you can consider excellence and institution building as the glue to hold people, and follow whichever technique, whichever consultant can advise you, I think you would have produced a great bank. And from whatever your next incarnation may be, it doesn't matter that you don't know. My founder of Unilever made a statement which I would like to close with. He said you should have the attitude of the road paver. The man who's paving the road in front of your house doesn't know who will travel on this road for how long, but he knows that when he has finished paving the road, lots of people will travel on that road with hopes in their heart and ambition in their eyes. And he says that is the reason why you're paving the road. You are a road paver. Whether you're the MD or the bank teller, it doesn't matter. If you can have the attitude of a road paver, you would have created a great institution. Thank you very much for all of you for listening to me. I will now close, and if there are 1 or 2 questions, otherwise I'm happy to end the session depending on how you all feel. I hope that's been useful. Chetana ji has worked incredibly hard to make sure that I'm brought in line and arrive for this. So thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, sir. Listening to you is really amazing. And I was excitingly waiting for this moment to come. And we were mesmerized to listen to your enlightened thoughts on excellence and institution building, which is the need of the hour. Definitely, sir, there are many people who want to interact to you, but since you have permitted us, I would request few of our leaders to interact to you. And for this, I will request, first of all, our Executive Director, Shri Gopal Singh Gosai, sir, uh, to raise his any question if he has. Over to you, sir. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir. Sir,
afternoon.
actually, let me tell you very frankly. I was given a question to be asked to you, but I am not asking that. But I am not asking that question because after listening to you, I have another question to ask to you,
Okay.
sir. Actually, what happens that all of us are at the age of 45 years plus. All those who are listening here today. At this stage, all of us in our personal life start teaching the culture to the others rather than learning about the new culture.
Right.
That means our mindset, theories, everything becomes a little more rigid, and we try to teach to our children, try to teach our students, try to teach the new person. And when at this stage we have to start learning a new culture, it becomes difficult.
Right.
Now, can you give me some idea on this, that how to get onto this?
That's a very good question. It's a human question, and I appreciate it, Gopal Singh ji, for asking the question. Uh, you look at nature around you. When the seed is small, it can adapt very well. It becomes a small plant, but it becomes a tree. But even that tree has to adapt to its new environment. Those who don't adapt are doomed to die quickly. That reminder that your shelf life is expiring and therefore you also have to adapt is a very important one. You know what happens when you're 45, 50 is you feel that you have earned enough and now you have to coach other people. But everybody through life is both a teacher and a student. Today, when I sit and write, I mean, Chetana ji said I write 16 books. It's a lot of effort for me. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning. My wife thinks I'm crazy. That's not a bad situation to be in, by the way. Uh, and I read so many books and I say, oh my God, I wish I had done this 25 years ago. But if I haven't done it, I can share it with somebody else because all of us are imperfect. So please remember, every day create a balance sheet in your mind. How have I changed other people? That's your credit note. And your debit note is how have I changed myself? And if one side of the balance sheet has lots of entries and the other side has zero entries, then start waiting for your retirement party. Is that helpful?
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Gosai, sir. Now I would request our next ED, sir, Dinesh Kumar Garg, sir, for his question.
Good afternoon, Gopal sir. It was great hearing to you, sir. Mesmerized, very useful thoughts. Sir, digitization is happening at a very fast pace post-pandemic. So, where do you see 5 years down the line that banking industry, what kind of digitization you see, sir, in the banking industry, sir?
Well, I'm not a banking expert, but I'll tell you what, as a customer, I have imagined. Okay. When I began my career in 1967, almost every Saturday, I would go to some hole of a place called a branch of a bank. And uh, I would stand in behind some counter with bars on it, and I'd push my passbook, and he would take out some big fat ledger or whatever it's called, and write with his hand. Then he'll cut out. He'll be actually adding and subtracting your bank balance. When I came home, I spent another half an hour checking whether his addition is right. Okay, and occasionally there were mistakes. If I didn't go to the bank, I felt I hadn't brushed my teeth. You know, there's a ritual every second Saturday or every Saturday. since your question is about digitization, I don't think there will be any bank branches 30 years from now. Maybe in Nilgiris or in the forests of Wayanad, there may be some bank branch. But banking will be on the palm. Digitization has to happen in that manner and will happen in that manner because the single overarching impression I have thought of in the last 5 years is the world has hyper connected and you can't reverse it. I'm not saying connected, hyper connected. And there is no reason why somebody sitting in the middle of the forest in Wayanad should not have his passbook updated on a real-time basis as compared to the guy sitting in Malabar Hill. I don't want to see the face of a branch manager of a bank. Therefore, the interface must be very good. I think those who are on top of digitization will be on top of banking, have a chance of being on top of banking. But those who are on the top of banking and low in digitization, count your days. I hope that doesn't sound threatening, Dinesh ji, but you asked me a question, so I'm giving you an honest reply. By the way, this is happening not just to banking. Automotive design, exactly the same. Uh, Sales forecasting, exactly the same. Um, Inventory control, exactly the same. When I was a young trainee, they said you must learn the operations. And I was sent to work as a salesman, as a supervisor. I was sitting in the depot in Sankey Street, Godown, for 4 weeks, making loading challans for trucks, how many cases of soap or shampoo, making carbon paper, and so on and so forth. Today, logistics is an art by itself. You see home delivery of things. No, it's so. The short answer is, uh, it is like having a thread ceremony without uttering a single word of Vedas. It's not possible. Either you utter the Vedas, but we are going into a situation where great bank, great digitization is the formula.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Garg, sir. For the next question, I would invite our next executive director, Birupaksh Misra, sir, to come forward. Sir, mute yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
Sir, I think one line of your talk which touched me most is that definition of cultural integration, that managing imperfections is the best thing to do about the cultural integration. Thank you, sir. I think the context which my question is said is that with the increasing, over the period, the data information overload has happened to the board, which has compelled the boards, organizational boards, to devote more time and energy for past and present analysis than charting out future course strategy. My question is that how to manage the data overload and get the board focus rebalanced?
One of the, I said 3+5 matrix. One of them is balancing the long term and the short term. And I'm going to be very brief. I may sound like a used car salesman because I'm going to give you such a short answer. You say, "Aise bol ke chala gaya." But you can read the books. You'll find examples of this. And I'm going to give you an example of this. You are quite correct, Virupaksha ji, in mentioning that you can get so overwhelmed with the immediate issues that you miss the wood for the trees. And the metaphor, I always like to think in metaphors because it helps a lot, it gives a lot of. At my age, I see my my daughter-in-law raising their children. A mother is the best example of having data overload and yet dreaming of the future. The baby is crying, it is not having its feed, she's hassled, the maid hasn't come today, all the things that happen in a family. She's busy doing all that. And she's tired by the end of the day. And we've all seen our wives, our sisters, our do this. But she never stops dreaming that my child will be a professor, my child will be a banker, my child will be educated, will go abroad to study. Show me a mother who has not dreamt about her child, despite being hopelessly preoccupied with day-to-day work. So try to be a mother. Just observe what your sister-in-law, mother-in-law, whoever is having a baby and you have access to. There is an art to managing short-term and long-term together. And the art is best done by observation rather than by preaching. I've not been a mother. None of you, unless there are any ladies on this, will ever be a mother. But I think a mother is the most marvelous institution of managing short-term and long-term.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
It's not, in this day and age, it's not fashionable to say be a mother, in the gender biased world. But mothers are fantastic. Not because my daughters and daughters-in-law are doing it, but because I've seen it happen. They are the finest managers. We don't give them a chance because we somehow think that their management skills are lying in the office, at the home. They are very good at managing short term and long term. Very good. Right.
Thank you, sir. And now moving ahead, I would request our CGM strategy, Nitesh Ranjan sir, to raise his question to you, sir. So, Nitesh sir.
Yes, sir. Very good afternoon. And thank you for bringing the insights from your own experience of managing mergers and amalgamation. I have actually two questions, and from the 3+5 matrix that you said. One is about the breaking barriers. I understand it's very, very important, not only for an individual to grow on the leadership chain, but also to take the organization from one level to the next level. But many a time, even though we wish to break the barriers, there is a tendency to maintain the status quo and not to disturb the status quo. So how do organizations actually inculcate that culture that people feel like people are get encouraged to break the barriers for the next level? That is one. Number two, that you said that people at the top 20-30 people should spend 40-50% of their time
I said
in
25 to
managing
40.
people.
25 to 40.
Yeah, yeah, 25 to 40 in managing people, understanding people. So again, at the top level, if you can share your insights from your experience, that what are the 2-3 tools or structures that one should think of that actually we are able to devote 25 to 40% time for the people. Thank you, sir.
So your second question, I'll answer first because I remember it. And your first question is, repeat it.
It is on breaking barriers.
Breaking
How
barriers.
to
Okay. So
create
breaking barriers and how do you spend time? Okay, I get it. So first, let me deal with breaking barriers. Uh, in my experience, the Lord Almighty, whether you call him Allah or Ram or Krishna or Jesus, gave us 4 times the amount of surface area to listen as compared to the surface area to speak. He's given you one mouth and 2 ears. Correct? And the ears are much bigger in surface area compared to the mouth. So 2 raised to the power 2. If you listen 4 times as much as you speak, you'll be able to break barriers. But very few leaders, including myself in my heyday, have failed to do so. Leaders think that they are invited, they are given bouquets. Some Chetana ji will come and say nice things about you. Then you give a speech and then you go away. Okay? A token interaction may happen. Then you get photographed, it's come in the House magazine, end of the day. Leaders have forgotten how to listen because in their management training, nobody has taught them how to listen. Everybody has taught them how to speak, presentation skills, public speaking, how to make an impact. Dale Carnegie. You look at what's happening again without our getting into the subject itself in this farmer bill. You, as a citizen, just think whether 4 times of listening has happened compared to 1 time of speaking. Go to any Arnab Goswami show and see who's listening to whom. Arnab Goswami's show is a mixture of people who are all speaking at the same time. The biggest barrier to breaking barriers is the inability to listen. And again, I'm using metaphorically. If you want a sound marriage, listen to your wife 4 times as much as you speak to her. It works, I can tell you at my age, it works miraculously. Miraculously. But unfortunately, in the busyness of our day-to-day work, hurry up, you have not given the check for the school fees, send the car to me, and don't forget I'm going to the airport now. You're not doing that. So 1:4, Mr. Nitesh. And the second one is about how do you spend time with people. I must explain to you, spending time with people doesn't mean sitting across like a psychologist or a psychiatrist and saying, tell me about your childhood. What did you do? Did you play marbles or did you play tops? That's not the kind of conversation I'm talking about. But thinking about people and their welfare is what I mean. And the best I've seen of this is in Levers, where we did things, for example, the higher you are, the more you must spend time with people who are powerless. That was one of the things, early things I learned. So the chairman of the company would go out on a planned basis, it was not by accident, uh, 6 times in a year to go and talk to distributors, area managers, salesmen. He would go, to the bullock with the to the place where the bullock cart or the would go to distribute our goods. In those days, there was no two-wheeler, four-wheeler, etc. And that has become ingrained in us. Now, when he goes to the field, he's not bothered. In those days, there was no telephone anyway, but nowadays he's always looking at his phone. No phone, nothing. He's talking to distributors, आपका माल कैसा चलता है, customer का क्या complaint है. Lal Bahadur Shastri, when he was the Prime Minister, he heard a lot about Operation Flood in Gujarat, Anand. So he said, I want to go and I will listen to Dr. Kurian, but I want to spend the night in a village in Kheda district. And I don't want them to know that I'm the Prime Minister. This became a major challenge for the security and stuff. He said, I will eat with the farmer, I'll sit on the floor, I'll eat with them, and next morning I would have had a question and answer session which is completely blank, like Vikramaditya did in our Vikram Betal stories. So my first formula for spending time with people is, it may be occasional, but it's very intense. And you have to do that by the more powerful you are, spending time with the least powerful people. So that's one way. The second way is that as you travel, I remember when I was the CEO, I would say, well, I'm going to Delhi for some meetings with government, etc. Who are our bright young people there? And the HR department was not capable of producing 6 CVs. I mean, they'll produce 6 CVs, but they will not be the best people because there's no way to select the best people. So we started a system of selecting the best youngsters, and I implemented the same thing when I came to Tata's, so that when you go there, you have their picture and their mugshot, and he's a BA from this place and an MBA from there, everything written down. And you're not asking him, tell me about yourself. But you're saying, I noticed that you're from Jabalpur. And after that, you went to Delhi to do JNU. Can you tell me what you learned significantly over there, which is useful to you in your job? So the guy feels damn happy. He feels really thrilled that my CEO or executive director has studied my CV. He knows I am from Jabalpur. He's coming straight to the point. How many CEOs get a dossier from their HR department saying, sir, you're going in between meetings, here are 6 people. Ratan Tata told me once, arrange 10 of the youngest, brightest people, and he spent 4 hours with them. 4 hours. But he had a piece of paper in advance from me that so that he could look at the fellow's face and say, you're Sukumar. You know how Sukumar felt for a long time. He said, wow, Ratan Tata recognized me. What do we do otherwise? You get into the lift, your eyebrows are furrowed. You're thinking which minister's call will come. You're not even smiling at the other guy. So I use the word people orientation not in a quantitative sense, 20 to 50%, but 25 to 40% of your emotional time, not your clock time. So don't say today's 8 hours, I'm going to spend 2 hours with people chit chatting. That's not what I mean. The intensity of what you do varies a lot during the day. So the emotional part of what you're doing is, I call it not clock time, but emotional time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we know that we are running out of time, but we have with us our CGM HR, Sri Kalyan Kumar sir, who has been instrumental in organizing this event. So I would request Kalyan Kumar sir to just come forward with his question.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Really, it was like a dream coming true, sir. We are really planning since long to invite you, and really it was a good gesture out of you that you have accepted our request. And as a newly born Union Bank of India, we are planning to create a great organization under the leadership of our visionary leader, our MD and CEO, Sri Rajkiran Rai, sir. And as you said, paving the road where so many generations will move. We are in that process, and your advice certainly it will help us in getting those direction and achieving our goal. So, sir, one question. Actually, I have heard your so many talks and on YouTube and everywhere. I am great admirer of your point. There was one word which you taught at so many B school, LWNT, learning what nobody teaches. I understand there is paucity of time, but in nutshell, in short, if you can enlighten us, sir.
Well, I'll be very brief. Uh, we are people who are basically ignorant people with short bursts of knowledge. So we are living in an ocean of ignorance with occasional spots of knowledge. And I think wisdom lies in the gaps. And they lie in human interaction, not in technical interaction. So being very good in IT, being very good in accounting or finance and balance sheet management, those are all the things that can be taught. But whatever cannot be taught has to be done through examples. We say, how do you learn the art of disagreeing without becoming disagreeable? This is one of the lessons I give in that LWNT. They say, oh, how can I say this to my MD and CEO? I can't say, sir, I don't agree with you. So I said, you have to choose the time and the manner in which you do it. And I give the example of what Vibhishana did in the court of Ravana when Hanuman was brought after being 10 days or 12 days of mayhem. Now, Vibhishana wanted to say to his elder brother that you should not kill the Doot. Because our Shastras are saying that you don't kill a messenger, you can hurt him a bit and punish him. Now, he was wanting to disagree with the decision because Ravana's eyes were rolling and all these people were saying, yes, boss, go for the guy, kill this monkey, right? We all know the same story. And if you look at what Valmiki has written in his book about Vibhishana, he addresses his brother. He says, sir, you're the most wonderful. You are so learned. 3 gods have come and blessed you. He does not behave your status to break the law. And the law, Article 2.3, says that you don't kill a messenger. Don't demean yourself. Punish him if you want. But you're too big a man. So, thoda masala lagaya, thoda praise lagaya. Like you're saying, Raj Kiran ji will lead us. Thoda masala lagaya, theek hai. But Raj Kiran ji won't be there forever, for God's sake. In 3 years' time, 5 years' time, I don't know how much time, there'll be a new Raj Kiran. There'll be Surya Kiran ji. You people have to do it. Don't count on Raj Kiran or Surya Kiran. All the Kirans who are sitting and listening to me have to do it so that irrespective of whether the Raj Kiran or Surya Kiran, this bank progresses and marches forward. This is not to diminish in any way the contribution of the MD and CEO, don't get me wrong. And this is exactly what Vibhishana did. He demonstrated how to disagree with a very powerful boss without becoming disagreeable. So I got many such little lessons, which I can't obviously cover all of them. I've greatly enjoyed. I've got a 13-hour presentation on LWNT. So you can imagine I'm trying very hard to finish off it 1 or 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So with this, sir, we know there are many attendees who wish to interact with you, sir. But looking at the time constraint, we are now at the end of the most eventful session we had today. And thanks from the entire Union Bank family, sir, for joining us and gracing this occasion, and definitely adding so many valuable insights, which is going to take Union Bank, rather I would call now New Union Bank, forward with excellence and building a very strong institution and robust institution by paving the path for success. Thanks a lot, sir, for joining. So we
Thank
will
you
be
very much,
looking
Chetmanji,
forward
and thank you,
from time to
Rajkiranji.
time.
All the
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you,
bye.
sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajkiranji. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.